Hi YouTube. I'm back to do more of my story. I think this is part 4. This is going from a short story that was only supposed to be a few minutes to a story that's probably going to end up being, many sections long, and but that's okay. It's all right. I guess, because I'm not doing this for other people. Really, I hope people enjoy it, but I'm doing it because it entertains me. So, part 4, where we left off, I have a few notes that I took, and because I have issues thinking of names, I have a list of character names that I made for each gender, and I'm going to start off. So, where we left off, just a quick summary. Kiera had woken up from her nap during a battle outside in the library, and she had found her sister's doll, and she had sat down for 2 days and decided that she's gonna find people to help her, and she wanted revenge. So yeah, she's timid and shy and scared, but she wants revenge because she doesn't know where her family is. So she's assuming that they're all dead. Just to clear that up. I think you guys figured that out. Actually, that last video has no views, so technically. Okay. So part 4. Oops. I highlighted the screen. Okay. So on the second day, after the second day of Kira sitting and doing nothing, she decided to, go out and get revenge on those who attacked her village. These strange people, because they can't be people from her own village. She's never seen any of them before. So she stands up, brushes the dust off her feet, off her. She picks up her sister's doll, which she had in her hand the entire time. She puts it in her belt. Just a quick description of Kiera. I think I left that out. Kiera has very curly brown hair that she keeps in a ponytail, and if she can, it's braided. In this situation, it's kind of in a ponytail. She's wearing just a long sleeve cotton shirt. You can imagine it looks like whatever, it's just long sleeves. She's wearing pants, and this world that she lives in, there's no real requirement for women or men to wear a certain kind of clothing. So yeah, so she's wearing pants and a belt and boots, because they're really worn boots. That's pretty much it. She's about my skin color, I guess. She's maybe a little more tan since she's outside more. Green eyes, pretty much it. So you can do whatever else you want with that visual. Any other characters make up in your mind. Yeah. So Kiera picks up her sister's doll and sticks it in her belt, and she looks around with her hands on her hips, and she thinks, where do I start? So she decides that she's gonna need provisions, for wherever she's going. She's still not sure where she's gonna get the help, as she's kind of blindly jumping into this, and she goes back into her village, and she finds the bakery, which had a stone, one wall that was stone and the rest was like wood, because the old bakery was all stone, but it had been destroyed, and they weren't able to recover enough supplies to rebuild it. So she goes to the old bakery. She goes to the bakery in hopes that, at least on the side with the stone wall, there will be some, bread or something. And she goes in there, and she finds the bakery, and she grabs hold of a burnt piece of wood that's across the doorway that had fallen down, and she tries to pull it out, and it's stuck. And so she keeps pulling, and when it doesn't give and her hands are all scratched from the wood, she decides to crawl into the bakery. So she gets down on her hands and knees, she crawls into the bakery, and she goes across the room. She's able to stand after she's gone in about a yard into the bakery. And she walks over to the wall and she starts kind of picking through the rubble, picking through there's parchment that the baker would wrap some of the bread in and some of the rolls in, and she found that and she thought that might be useful, so she takes that and she kind of folds it up and she kind of puts it on her arm. And she keeps digging around the bakery and she finds a parchment bag, like a paper bag, filled with flour in it. She's like, okay, that's not bread, but that's fine. So she takes the flour, she puts it off to the side, and she goes through the bakery and she discovers a few things. She finds a rolling pin, which she decides to leave behind. She finds a couple knives, which she takes with her. And she found another parchment bag with about 10 rolls in it. And so she takes the flour, the rolls, and the knives, and she carries them outside. And she realizes that she doesn't have anything to carry them in, so she picks up the stuff. She kind of walks around, and she finds, they got a bunch of different people in her village. She walks around, she finds the tanner's place, where they tan the hides with leather. And she goes into the tanner's, and the tanner's, actually, there's no inside to it. It was an all-wood building, of course, except for, it was an all-wood building mostly. So she kind of walks over the ruin of the building, and she kind of noticed that the inside of the building, the way middle of the building, is pretty much untouched by wood. So she digs through the charred bits of leather and the ones that weren't actually kind of burnt and unusable and dried out. She picks up one and she kind of looks at it, and she finds a big piece of leather that is about size of maybe a pillow, one of modern day pillows. Obviously this isn't a professional book, so it doesn't matter if I'm talking kind of yeah, so. And she picks it up and she kind of makes it in, she kind of takes she takes it and she kind of pulls it out. She still really doesn't have anything to carry the stuff in, so now she's got this big pile of stuff. She doesn't know what to do with it. She races back home. She grabs, she finds the remains of her mother's sewing kit, which luckily has some needles still remaining in the way bottom of the room, because there was no basket left, but she found some thread, I guess, and she picks it up and she runs back with the needle and thread, and she sits down on the ground, puts the leather in her lap, and she starts sewing it into a rough pouch. And while she's doing this, she's constantly stopping and looking around with every little noise she hears, and she's sewing so fast she's pricking herself, and her hands are all messed up now. And she, after about an hour, she has a pouch, and she went and found another strip of leather, sewed that on. She's now got one strap bag, and she takes that and she takes the rolls, throws it in there. She takes the knife, she kind of wraps them in other pieces of leather she found and throws them in there. And she kind of just puts her sister's doll in there. Now the bag of flour is too big, and she decides that she'll just carry it. So she has the bag of flour, and so she puts the bag over her shoulder. She's carrying the bag of flour in her arms. She's walking around. She's rummaging through all the village looking for supplies. She finds the remains of fruit and stuff. She finds some dead animals. She's not really too sure about the animals, and she doesn't really know. She doesn't really trust that the metal that was made out of the weapons. There's just something off about the weapons. The intruders, the Dark Armies, the attack that the soldiers brought with them, that she's not sure, she doesn't trust it. It said something that, like, anything cut by this, you don't want to touch it. She's unnerved by it, so she's not going near the animals that were, hit, that are dead. She just doesn't want to go there. So she, keeps going through the village. She finds some supplies. She finds kind of a, she finds more knives, but she doesn't keep them because the only ones that she found that she thought were good enough were the baker's knives, which were big ones, sharp, sharp blades, and she thought they were good enough. She did keep a little tiny knife that she could use to, like, whittle, tinder for a fire and such. And she didn't find much else except for maybe some food and some bits of fabric, and that's pretty much it. And so she stands in the center of the village after she gathered as many supplies as she can, and she looks back at the library, and she decides that she should go into the library. And the reason she decided to go into the library was that she had a feeling that if she was going to try to find her family, or try to, if she was going to seek revenge on these people, she needed to know about her enemies. And so the library, having the magical qualities that it had, Kira assumed that maybe if she went in there and she needed to find something, because every time she went into the library, she always seemed to be led to the book she needed. So she thought, well, maybe the library would help her in this situation. So Kira goes into the library, which always will let her in, no matter what the situation is. And lets her in. She sets her bag down on the floor, puts the flour down. Big cloud of flour pops out of the bag of flour, and she looks around, and she puts her hands on her hips, and she thinks, what do I need to find? Obviously, the people aren't from around here, so first thing we have to assume is that maybe they're from another country. So she decides to look for books about other places, but she can't seem to find any that seem to fit the description of the people. And then the second thought she had was, well, the people fighting did look a lot like the people who live in my country. In Ariasha? In Ariasha? I have to write that down. In Ariasha, so maybe they're from Ariasha. Well, they're nobody from my village, of course. So she decides to look up a book about Ariasha. And she finds one. The book wasn't very helpful, but she found one, and it basically stated there were two different groups of people, majority groups of people, living in Ariasha, and those people were the old ones and the knowledgeable ones. And so she decided to find more information on these old ones. So she goes through the books, and she finds a book on the old ones, and it's very vague, and there's no real information on that. And she was pretty sure that it was the old ones in the first place, because the war had been going on for 2 years. That lapsed my memory, and she was pretty sure, but she wasn't sure about the weaponry, because she hadn't heard of that. She didn't know what it was. And so she starts reading this book, and this book has missing pages. And in this book, it's basically detailing the entire history of the old ones and Ariasha and the people of Ariasha. And she's reading it, and she can't find any information after the wars began. She didn't even find any information about the old ones starting the war, which she knew had happened. So she takes the book, because the book had missing pages, and she was suspicious about that. She takes the book, she sticks it in her bag, and she decides to look for someone. And she goes through this entire library, and she can't find a single thing on it. The only thing left that she found was one of the journals. It's a record that the library keeps of itself. and it details every single book, every single thing that's happened to the library. And in the book, she, to be continued.